Hello and welcome to the CG Pro podcast. This is episode 49 and we have Peter Baustaedter with us here today. We're going to introduce Peter. Thank you for being with us today, Peter.
Thank you for having me, Ed.
You bet. You bet. So, episode 49. If you enjoy what you hear today, you can follow us at becomecgpro.com or on our Facebook group. It gives me great pleasure to welcome Peter here today. Peter's had an amazing career spanning decades in high-end visual effects and moving into virtual production and some of the things that we'll get into today. But Peter, originally going back to the 90s, worked at Digital Domain on some iconic movies, Apollo 13, Titanic, things like that. Moved over to Weta in New Zealand, and I'm gonna stop there because Peter's going to do a much better job. But Peter, welcome. Great to have you here today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me again. Or thank you again for having me. I don't know how far back you want to reach for a bit of a background. I actually, I'm like first generation home computer in a way. That's what got me into computer graphics. So I grew up with the venerable Commodore 64. That's where I discovered that you can paint on the television.
Me too.
And there was no turning back, for me, it was amazing back then that was something like a self-illuminated image and got hooked, painted with a joystick, and then switched to the Amiga, which I think a lot of us older visual effects people have a connection with. And that's where
I wanted one. I just wasn't allowed one. I ended up with an Amstrad. But yeah, Commodore 64 Spectrums, I had to go to my friends' houses to borrow them. But yeah.
Oh, yeah. I was lucky enough that my parents were understanding enough, and the Amiga in 1987 was pretty expensive. So I guess I was whinging loud and long enough. And started out with pixel graphics there, and then was a part of the demo scene, which some people might know about, which is basically where coders showed off their prowess, and also people that made music and graphics that really kind of started on the Amiga with like self-running or self-standing or standalone programs that were usually coded in assembler with all kinds of bouncing stuff and scroller texts and all that. So I was into that. And then I was always hungry for like bigger machines in a way. So I started in the early 90s. I founded post-production in Vienna and worked on an old Quantel video paint box that was as big as a fridge. And every time you did a little cutout, you could hear the hard drive going tuck, 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 and saving that minuscule chunk of graphics. And then switched to a Quantel graphic paint box, which was a really rare animal. Which was already in like 92, it could do over 4K on the machine. It had a big HDVS Sony screen on it, as as wide as it was deep. We're like, well, I don't know what in euros, but at least €1 million or something like that back then, because it was all hardware. And after that, I was first I had to go to the Austrian Army because it's compulsory. And while I was in there, I kind of read an article in the newspaper that James Cameron and Stan Winston were opening a visual effects studio. And a friend of my dad's had connections over there through Arnold, classically, but he knew Stan Winston too. And I next time he flew to LA, I gave him a portfolio and said, please, if you have any way to get this to Stan Winston Studios, I'd be eternally grateful. And he said, try my luck. And he came back and said, yeah, I left it at Stan's. He knew Stan. And he wasn't there, but his assistant assured me he would look at it. And to this day, I've got the envelope I gave him with my original portfolio with a Stan Winston sticker on it saying, to Scott Ross, Digital Domain. So they sent it on. And then my mom said, there's a fax from America, Peter. And it was from Scott saying, basically, if you pay for everything yourself, you can become an intern at Digital Domain. So that's how I landed at DD at first. So sold everything, took the little money I had and went over there, yeah, and kind of never looked back. So it was quite an adventure. I was 23 back then, so when I moved to LA, and I remember the first day that was at the Venice campus. After I signed up and all this, Louis Dresch, my dear assistant, said, "Let's see where they are," because there were only like 30 people, you know, on the digital side. And we went in the screening room, and it was all pitch dark. And I kind of ended up looking at the screen, and it was all of a sudden big flames showing up. And there was Apollo 13. They had rendered some separation flames of the rocket separation. I think Caleb Howard did those, and I'm like, wow, I have arrived. You know, that was kind of my moment where I realized that there was something big with my 23 years. Yeah, and then as you said, we go on, and also in '97 I went to Hawaii and worked for 2 years on The Spirits Within, the Final Fantasy Spirits Within, the Square software movie. And I didn't do the whole stretch, and then ended up in LA again. And in 2002, I went down to Weta for the first time to work on Two Towers. Then I went back for a stint in LA, and then 2004 I went down for good, and stayed at Weta. Yeah, as you mentioned before, King Kong, and we went to Avatar and a little bit more. And in 2011, I left and started as a visual effects art director independently. So,
what an adventure! Sounds very exciting.
Yes, and certainly a few pages in the diary there. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so coming out of post and going in production in a way. So I was attached to the visual effects department, and it was for a television series called Spartacus, which is kind of like a quite raunchy TV series. But the special thing about it was shot entirely in front of green screen. And for like 2010, 2011, that was not a usual thing. You know, it was actually quite unique. We didn't shoot a day outside, and there were lots of things that had to go into the green environments and you know, establishing shots and all that. And I had a great little team, and we're helmed up by our visual effects supervisor, Charlie McClellan, who was really great to work for. And yeah, did 2 seasons like that, and really was quite a contrast coming out from post to all of a sudden being more on the coalface and fairly quickly hanging out of a helicopter, shooting photos of volcano, and so from like the little dark matte painting room I'd been in, from there it was quite not saying that is bad, you know, but it's quite a change, and yeah, I had a really good time and learned a lot of things. Also the whole production process. When we usually did look development sequences that we picked out certain sequences of an episode that we fully developed before it went to the vendor. So we had a blueprint and also some assets then to hand off, and we took that all the way to the grade. So I learned basically also going all the way into the grade, which is quite valuable.
Yeah, and rare for somebody in visual effects to know all the way from production, pre-production, and then into post. Yeah,
absolutely, yeah. And I enjoyed all of this in a way. As I said when we talked before, I'm a bit of a Swiss Army knife, so I'm interested in quite a few things. So that played right into this, and was actually Charlie who started calling me a Swiss Army knife. So that's where that came from. And after Spartacus, Charlie and I went on and worked on Marco Polo, the Netflix series. The first season was shot in Malaysia, so we were there for a couple of months. Was a really interesting experience. Pinewood had built a studio there, brand new, and we moved in there. And yeah, when they shot on locations, people had to go out and look for snakes first, you know, and all that, which I guess in Australia you have, but yeah. And I also remember I did a concept of them being on a mountain pass and all snow and all that. And it must have been like 35 degrees, you know, was just all dressed up and people probably have been secretly sweating. And then I put my mountains in the back and all that. So was quite, I really enjoyed Malaysia. Not only the work there, but a great country. And the season after that, we ended up in Hungary, which was also, we shot at Korda Studios. I think The Martian shot right before us. And it's funny, there's the security office in front of Korda Studios. It's like a little cab and it has like those two little horns out. And I saw the trailer for The Martian over there. Like, wait a second. So they made that the Space Center, you know, like the plate was just the security cab of Korda Studios, and then it replaced it with the futuristic Space Center in the back. And did that. And then did various things, you know, also as a freelancer in New Zealand, the market is not as I would say big as it is, for instance, in LA. So I also went back to Weta in 2017 and joined the fantastic matte painting team there. For me, it was like going back to school and really getting a tech upgrade and it was a great experience. And made quite a few friends there again. And what did we work on? A whole slew of things, basically. But yeah, it was learned how to use Clavis, which unfortunately I think they don't make anymore. The 3D package. That was have you ever used that?
Yeah. No, I haven't. No, and I know it.
Yeah.
They just stopped doing it.
Yeah.
I never got a chance to work on it.
Great package because they had a completely different approach of how you would build your scene, and it was fairly kind of placeholder based, and you can filter stuff and you can render past King and instance in King. I think it was for Terminator Dark Fate. I did a set extension and it needed some gravel in the foreground, and I just scattered each gravel piece. It was like, I think like 12 million or more. I don't remember the number exactly, but it looked exactly like the gravel in the plate. You know, there was no problem. So, and after while at Weta, I also heard that Rings of Power was coming to New Zealand, and I thought, well, maybe I should give it a shot, at least knock at their door and see. And I interviewed with the visual effects department first, and I didn't really, there was in 2019, didn't really hear anything concrete back. In my contact in production, I said, not really sure what's going on and if they want me or not. And she said, you know what, also the art department is looking for somebody like you. And I interviewed with the production designer, and we was like, yeah, this seemed to fit the bill, and they hired me. And a week before I started, that production designer left, so I was like, do I still have a job? And they're like, no, you're good. And then I ended up in the art department, and that kind of really started my virtual production journey there, fairly by myself. The first said, do you want a dark corner? You know, being the visual effects. Yeah, and I said, no, please, if you can put me right in the middle of the art directors. And so I can learn and also communicate with them and be in the middle of it. And first I did, I started working with a production designer fairly soon, and with a new one. His name is Ramsey Avery, and he's a great guy. He was really also responsible for the success of what developed during that production on my side. And pretty soon we found that we needed to connect all the different sets we had. You know, let's say, I don't know if you've seen the series, they're the Harfeet, the predecessor of the Hobbits. You know, they have the camp here, and then they go up the mountain here and all that. And what is connected in the series, in the story world, is, you know, a 4-hour drive south of Auckland. Then it's another 45 minutes north of Auckland there or wherever else. So completely fragmented locations, but we needed to have an overview, and also in order to design the whole world. We need to connect all that. And by that time, I had another artist, Patrick, who was a godsend, and we started out in Maya, either taking build sets or the geometry from the art department, put that in, scanned some locations with photogrammetry and all that, and stitched it together. But we found, not to poo-poo viewport, but it had a pretty hard time. We immediately hit our limits with it, because it's once you turn on some of the functions, the rendering actually can take quite long out of viewport too. If you want to make a fly through, for presentation to the showrunners, you crank it up, you'll wait quite a bit. And then Patrick said, we should try Unreal. I'm like, yeah, I think that's a good idea. So we did the next setup, which was for the orcs in the trenches, where the orcs dig all the trenches. We did quite a bit of that. We did that in Unreal, and we never looked back. It was really a revelation how that just fit hand in glove for what we needed to do. So out of that kind of developed then a whole workflow. We worked a little bit in isolation, I think, and also what the department needed. And we built our little machine around the needs of the production designer, and then also around the needs of the VFX supervisor. So I was actually part of both departments, and actually my paycheck was split between both departments. So one paid half and the other, which might seem irrelevant, but that means how I had to walk the line there. And I enjoyed it quite a bit. And I actually at the end of season 1, Ron Ames, the visual effects producer, said, and that was for me the kind of the biggest compliment. He said, "And Peter, I have to tell you, you really walked the line. That means I really balanced between." And I think with a role like that, it's very important that you don't favor each department, but go by the needs of each department and have a bridging function. And sometimes you're a bit of an emissary for each, so you try to blend both sides, and that worked really well, I'd like to think. So yeah.
How do you do well at something like that? Like what kind of skills come together to help you do well at that? I know that space a little bit myself, but I'd love to hear some of your takes on how there's a lot of things to unpack there. There's not just technical skill, but there's also a lot of personal skills and leadership and diplomacy and being able to navigate the human part of the puzzle as well as the technical one.
Yes, I'm not that technical. I like technology, and I think I have an interest enough to adapt things and all that, but you'd never find me writing a script. That's kind of where my limits are. However, it's a whole, I guess it's accumulation also of the little story I told before, because I started working with the art department during Spartacus, and had a lot to do with the production designer there. So I kind of knew what the art department was about. And the same happened again during Marco Polo. So it was not a completely new venture for me. And one thing I forgot to mention, actually, in the years in between, I also did On Set VFX Supervising for 2 different TV shows, which is also something that, if you work in visual effects, you need to get on set just to know what happens. So which was also, I can't believe I didn't mention it before, an eye-opener to everything. Because, sometimes when you just impose, and I just speak for myself, but you go, why did they shoot it this way? It's so stupid. And then they go like, well, you're actually lucky you got anything at all. Once you see how it runs on set, you go like, okay, that
like
was
a plate.
Exactly. Yeah.
Your measurements too.
Yeah. Exactly. So that was also a good background, because that gave me the background being on location on the stage, and also did data wrangling. It was actually for Ash versus Evil Dead, the Evil Dead TV show.
Oh, cool.
Which was a ton of fun to work on, actually. And I already knew the crew from Spartacus. It was kind of the same crew. and they were really nice to me as a noob, and yeah, quite grateful, and yeah, learned tons there too. So that also flowed into this. So a bit of an art department background, knowing on set, and then also having a fairly long visual effects or a fairly large visual effects background too. So that all kind of meets there in a way. And then you need to be a communicator, because mostly it's about communicating. Even like I call Unreal a communications tool when we deploy it, because you basically answer questions, and you also invite other people to answer questions or ask questions above this sandbox you're building. So and the skills, yeah, you need to have a background, of course, in you need to know Maya, because that's kind of like the interface in the front end where you collect everything else and package everything up. And then Unreal, I did my own photogrammetry quite a lot, because it allowed me to be quicker and a bit more independent. And we never did final pixel stuff, it was always for layout. So the measurements were, or the scale was exact, but the fidelity didn't really have to be there that much.
Right.
And
what tools are you using for the photogrammetry?
Reality capture mostly, yeah. And with a good set of April tags in various sizes. So for smaller stuff, I usually use an L-shaped thing that I can throw in that has 3 April tags on it, where I know the measurements in between. Mm-hmm. And then for aerial stuff, you can never make them big enough. Once you're up there with a drone, it's like, oh no, it's a meter, but it's like this. So, but that's super helpful. And then I think reality capture is really in a class of its own, at least in as far as I know, this area. I actually started
with that too. I used Agisoft and Alice Vision and other tools as well. But reality capture seems to break. You're only supposed to have. You can't have. What is it? Good, quick, and cheap all at the same time in anything. But that seems to kind of break that rule.
Yeah, the good and cheap, and then the quick you do yourself with a beefy machine. Yeah. So yeah. I actually have at home. I've got a 32 core old server machine I use to just crunch through that I built myself, that crunches through photogrammetry, which works pretty well with a decent graphics card. But yes, no, it's great. I actually did during Marco Polo in Hungary. I had a little Phantom still with a GoPro, and I'm like, I wonder if I can do that. So I actually flew off a location and put that through scanned it through Agisoft PhotoScan, and I got something out of it. Of course, the horrible GoPro lens and all that, right, beat the fidelity out of it. But I could actually build that was actually my first kind of, if you saw a virtual production moment in a way that actually where I went like, actually this works. It's not great, but if I keep working on this might be a really nice tool. So, and then it goes on. Just normal photography really helps too, if you just need reference, and then shooting tons of photogrammetry. And a bit of sculpting. I used to prototype. I used Oculus, or now Adobe Medium, if you know that one. It's a VR sculptor, a voxel sculptor, which I really love to just do quick organic stuff. In the first season, there was the volcano that, oh no, spoiler, sorry. There was the volcano that explodes, but we did the inside the cavern in the inside of the volcano. I cranked it out within, I think, with iterations within 2 or 3 days, just a couple of sessions, and threw that straight into Unreal again, and Patrick made some really nice lava and had some good camera moves going to just present it to the VFX Art Supervisor, and it's a really fun way of working and quick visualization. So
what is it you like about that method, about using Medium as opposed to like going off and Z brushing or anything else?
I have to admit, I don't know how to use ZBrush. Yes,
Everybody's
it
got a
bugs
beef
me
with
off
that.
like a bronco every time I try, but I need to really get down to it because look, it's an industry standard now, and it's a really good tool. So I still need to do that. Yeah.
It's
So
really
that's
cool
why
to
I
hear
chose
that,
it.
that it was practical and useful. And I think people always assume certain tools in the process, but know that it's evolving now. And you mentioned Unreal Engine and Maya, but that's an interesting one. That's a surprising one. I wondered also whether people are starting to pick up other tools like Blender instead of Maya, or if that's starting
We've
to
got quite a bit of Blender these days. I'm also in the mix. And one other thing about Medium is, when you sculpt, normally you sculpt on the tablet, which is, X and Y. And when you sculpt in VR, you have a full axis motion. So you also get depth. And that makes for, in my opinion, for a quicker sculpt and organic stuff is really great to do. If it's hard surface stuff, I tried hard surface stuff in Medium too. Don't do it. That would be Gravity Sketch then, which I also use a little bit for that, which is an industrial design package that's pretty genius in my opinion. But yeah, so for that purpose, it was good. I would never go with like for final mesh, but to just get an idea in. You can say, well, why don't you kit bash? You can kit bash too, but that basically, if you voxel sculpt, you get more detail out. You kind of immediately spires or whatever else. And being in stereo helps a little bit too, just to feel that space.
What headset do you like?
I've got still a Vive Pro.
Yep.
Just because when you're sculpting, you spend 2 or 3 hours, and I first had just an old Oculus Rift, but after an hour, it feels like you're pressing an old sneaker in your face. So that's the Vive Pro is quite luxurious that way, and right now we're using Quest 2 with a nice. I think if you do a lot of VR, you need to get a nice head mount system, which is usually where you can tighten in the back. That gives you more endurance in a way.
Yeah, it's important to we spend a lot of time in virtual production in VR, scouting and that kind of thing as well. It's important. And how do you feel like did you see the new Apple headset came out yesterday? Excited about that?
Yes, I'll have to sell one of my children for that.
Right.
I'll see. I mean, it looks great, and I wanna actually see, because I think it's gonna come out in 3 months. I think I want to see actually all the software backhand and how it is, when it runs and all that. I was surprised by its size, how big it is. But yeah, I'm not gonna judge it until I hopefully get the opportunity to put one on and have a go. So yeah,
that's
I think that the headsets that are out right now, like the Quest 2, is completely adequate for that stuff that we're doing. And as you said, also if you have clients come in, that's silly, but that head strap is good. That you want to make, like, when you have people that haven't really been in VR a lot and all that, you want to make them as comfortable as you want, and you don't want to damage their hair or things like that, So having a good piece of gear that's easy to use and makes them comfortable is definitely a winner. To quickly go on that tangent. Yeah, let's see there.
So a couple of questions. Yeah, you were saying the same thing too. So we have a couple of questions here. Let's take the second one. With how virtual art is developing with XR filmmaking, is there an interest in team members with experience in lighting and camera work to work in the engine?
Absolutely. Even for us, if we're attached to the art department, but you still deal with all the stakeholders, which is your showrunner, your director, your DOP, and you need to know the language first of all. So if they say tilt, boom, and all that, or that chart where it says pan, 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 pan. We had that hanging up in our studio. But you need to know all this, and also it's a matter of presentation. So they don't know really, or they know Unreal, but what they're interested in is the image and their work. That means you need to be able to use the language, but also present in a way that they understand and that works for them. That means, when usually I present myself, or there might be another person, because that's a bit of a skill too. So knowing camera and knowing how you frame something and all your focal lengths and what those focal lengths mean and all that is really important, and makes for just a better interface to your stakeholder. And lighting, I call it, sounds silly, but the shiny. You build something rough and all that, but you always want to apply a bit of shiny. That means you want to make it look nice, and you want to make it look cinematic. And then additionally, you also want to hint already towards a lighting that will happen at the final stage or at a later stage or on set. So you want to be very aware about the limitations and tools that are being used and limitations that happen. So I usually get along very well with DOPs because of my photographic background, and just I think being a DOP is such a cool job. And if they know that you have a bit of a background, that's already a door open in a way, and it's just a good way to approach them. So I remember and also it's, when you present, you have like the director in there, the DOP and all that. That's a lot of power and money in that room. So if you're having trouble presenting, and you're going, I don't know how this, they're on their phone. A couple more seconds, they're out the door, and that must not happen. So not only do you need to have a background, also you need to know how to present on the machine and what to present, and that goes then into preparation of your Unreal project and how you stack things, and that's different again from what you're doing if it's a traditional visual effects show where you like Rings mostly was like with blue screen, how you present that, or if you work in a more virtual production kind of environment where there's a screen involved, they're all different requirements, and you need to stack your deck in a way that works smoothly. So you do not want to stammer around or go quiet. And even when I teach people how to present, I said, don't say hold please, say, or this will take a minute, say coming right up, and it even goes down to the lingo you're using, or how you're treating your guests in a way. So there's no stopping. It's coming its own way. There it is. Isn't it great? So that is a bit of, has a bit of a showman, a tiny bit of a showmanship part to it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting how more environments have become kind of like Flame was the only one of those where you'd be super client facing and have to present imagery live, and now we've got all these other tools back into 3D. That was something which in Maya was really difficult. You'd usually have to send them away or wait or just send them a video of it or whatever. Now we're in 3D environments doing kind of Flame sessions with clients and having more people doing that.
That's a great comparison. I actually worked like that on the graphic Padbox too, which was also with a client next to you. So yeah, it's kind of I guess a similar pressure. So preparation is key. Yeah, but that's interesting how that changed. And now Unreal, you can do so much, and it's actually quite amazing, especially with 5 now what you can do. But that also means you need to be more prepared, because there's a whole plethora of things you can offer and you need to master. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. We've had another question that's about Unity and Weta. So the question is, what do you feel about Unity, Weta, and Unreal? Which one you'd invest your time into if you had to pick?
That's a quite loaded question there. But I would say, look, every tool has something that is unique to it, I guess. And I wouldn't really want to compare Unity to Unreal because I don't know Unity, to be honest. I've opened it a few times, but I don't have any depth in it. And so I know a lot about Unreal. So I would say whatever tool fits your job and your environment you pick, you know. So that's personally I would pick Unreal because I know it, and I think they have a great tool set for virtual production, and they have a killer community outreach, and are very accessible with their software, you know. And Unity, I think is I don't hear that much about, I guess, because Epic's marketing is just very unbeatable. Let's say it like this, you know. They've got a really. Also, I was lucky and I could join. It was cohort 3 of the fellowship,
Oh, yep.
the Unreal Fellowship, and that was amazing. You know, there was a 5-week crash course that really I had used Unreal before for Rings, but afterward it really changed the way I used Unreal and supercharged me. It was quite an amazing experience, even though I got up at 4:30 because it started at the US West Coast time. So in New Zealand, where that was a bit early, and then I did, so it was 3 hours lessons, then it was 3 hours lab, and then I went to work. Yeah. And then I get home. I did half days. Rings was nice enough. Ron Ames was nice enough to say, "Yeah, we can do that. Don't let anything get burned on the stove. But otherwise, go and do half days." And then I got home at 7. I did my project till 10. And like in the 4th week, I was like, "Oh, okay, about time to finish this," because it was. Because of the time difference, quite a slog, but an amazing program. So it was really cool to be a part of.
That's so cool. Yeah. Well, so as you've kind of moved around this much into all these different facets of visual effects and production and virtual production and pre-production, what's your guide in this? How do you decide what moves to make? How do you was it what excited you, or what was kind of happening at the time? A mix of what helps you make your decisions about making those changes in your career?
Sometimes by accident, sometimes by necessity, and sometimes by choice. It's, as you walk through life, that's usually a mixture of, like, I haven't met anyone yet that planned their life out 100%, so and also personal interest. Usually it's based on technology in a way. It's like, oh, that's cool, I want to try that. And the reason why I started to get into VR and all that was also because I was out of a job in early 2018. There was just not much going on, which I used as an opportunity, to do a personal project and to just immerse myself in things that I was interested in anyway, but didn't have time because of work. And I usually turn into a student again when that happens. And that's where I started sculpting with Medium also, and that helped me then immediately in Rings and actually some other jobs too. So it's a bit of, and I didn't choose it because I'm like, I will, use this in virtual production 3 years from now. Nobody knows, because I thought it was a really cool tool. I just wanted to dive in. So, it's a mixture.
Is there a feeling you could describe of when you see something and you feel like that's something that you should spend some time on?
Well, it's excitement, I guess. That harkens back to, when I first saw the Commodore 64 in a shopping mall, or I remember seeing that old game Marble Madness on the Amiga. I'm like, how is this possible, and so that kind of triggers my hunger and interest to explore in a way. So it needs to be interest too. You cannot cane yourself to do something you're not interested in, and especially in our job, that you need to love it, because despite all, working on movies and all this, it's a hard job. And it especially also once you get on the production side, which is quite a different water than post. There are more rapids in there. It's a bit more rough and tumbling, but it has other benefits. But long days, sometimes productions are difficult. You need to love it, otherwise you go like, why am I doing this for? So in interest and passion and love for that area. I'm sure it's the same for you. That's also what made early digital domain so exciting, by the way, because there were so many people. LA was the only place where you could do computer graphics at that time. So you had all those people from the world kind of congregating there because they're like, we need to do this. We're really, where can we do this? So it was almost like a global pilgrimage to LA, and that was really nice. At the end, visual effects is still like that anyway. It's quite eclectic and international. So, but back then it was kind of like there were no schools or anything. We just showed up there because there was no other place to go in a way. So, yeah.
Right. It was like the support group for the world for computer graphics, if you're lucky enough to get into it. So yeah, I was curious whether you'd done any, what did you study at school? Did you do any things that lent you towards this? I know that it wasn't computer graphics training as there is now, but.
Yeah, well, when I actually asked at universities, like, I want to do computer graphics. What do you have? And they're like, oh, so you want to learn how to code? And I said, no, I want to make imagery and all this. It's like, yeah, you want to learn how to code? I'm like, no. So, I mean, that conversation didn't happen like that, but that's the gist of it. There was nothing. So I had to go already into the professional world. So I started on the paint books, I think, was 21, if I'm not completely off. Yeah. And kind of first part-time and all this, and immediately went into the working world because that's where the cool, exciting hardware was. And that was the only place to learn it. So I was lucky that the studio in Vienna I worked for was really good. And that was kind of my university. I had two awesome bosses, Andreas and Albert. And, if I did well, I got a pat on my 22-year-old head. And when I messed up, I got a kick in the ass. And that worked pretty well for me. Not literally. But they showed me the first time, like, how to move in production, like in a production environment, even though it was small, but we worked on high profile stuff. We did like world campaign for Swatch and Audi and stuff like that. So it was a small company, but really did like, mostly for print, things like that. And that prepared me for digital domain actually. And also, not only with technical skill, but also how to move within a post-production. Yeah.
And then
no university, but I did go to art school where I did have 4 years of photography, and we also back then learned film and video. So we still shot on a 16mm camera, just a little bit, but it's good to have gotten that flavor. And was actually the 4 years of photography was great. I used that knowledge every day.
I think it's something that everyone should learn too. I did code because I had asked that same question. I did computer science and learned programming because I thought that's how I was going to make imagery, and this is not entirely wrong. But while I was at university, experiencing photography and joining the camera club and going in the dark room and understanding that, it all kind of it didn't really make sense to me at the time, totally. But following those same kind of excitement, little glimpses of things that could be. We get another question here. Someone's asking, what do you do to keep on top of all the new technology coming out? What do you do to always keep learning?
Yeah, that's kind of a tough one, isn't it? Because there's so much right now. I guess, depends on my Facebook feed has a lot of stuff. Really, and then also on LinkedIn, once you hone in on your interest, honestly saying like you just pick things up from there and various other things. And then people tell you too, that's the cool thing about working in a studio. If you work with somebody goes, oh my God, did you see this? Or that interpersonal exchange of, have you ever seen this? is also equally important. So it's once again, it's a mixture of everything. And nobody, if anyone says they keep on top of everything, it's either their job, like they're a computer graphics journalist, or I don't know. But I mean, there's so much to do. I mean, keeping tabs on it and all that you can, but then learning stuff, you need to specialize. It's even, even I'm specialized. I mean, my trade is being a matte painter, and I know very much in there. But once again, it's a bit of a generalist thing, which I guess works in my favor for all the other stuff. But yeah, it's hard, and then when you're actually in a job, and I'm sure you know that too, you almost don't have time to pick up new stuff. You do learn stuff, but it's very job centric, and all the interesting stuff falls by the wayside until you come up for a breather. And that also depends on if you're at a big studio that is, has an educational program to it and all that, and takes good care of its people, which is great. If you're on the production side, it's all on you. It's a fairly solo existence, because once the production ends, the deck gets reshuffled. People go all ways. You happen to work with some people again, but usually it's you and your knowledge.
Another question, someone's saying, I'm curious what the industry is looking like for entry-level positions. Can you get in and learn on the job, or do you need 5 years experience to get in at the bottom? I know that's changed quite a bit over the years.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's still what you can do. If you rock up and you have, something to show that looks amazing, people certainly talk to you and go like, oh, actually, we need somebody like that. But there is some industry experience is needed, especially on the production side. It's fairly hard to learn on the job because it's so fast moving. But it's not saying that it doesn't happen. I think they're just a bit more rare than for instance, a facility like Weta that has a new talent program, and other facilities too, where you can go in like fresh from uni and all this, and they take good care of you, and you learn the ropes. On the virtual production side, yeah, look, I think it's a very personal thing how motivated you are, and it's luck, but you need to be visible. That means talk to people and try to grab at opportunities. The one misconception that I have myself is quite often like, oh, all the positions are taken, that's all. It's like, no, it's ever moving. There's like gaps open up, and if you're there at the right time, boom, in you go. And if you're lucky, you have a great supervisor or whoever else it is, that will show you stuff and get you on the way. But once again, you better love it, because it's a hard job. And if you love it and you're interested, you'll find your way. I'm convinced of that. It's just depends on the amount of love that gets you in, or of passion, So yeah, that and how motivated you are, that gets you further ahead.
Yep. Yeah, great advice. Yeah, I like that expression. What is it? Luck is where preparation meets opportunity.
Exactly. So, yes.
I think that's quite descriptive of that.
And nobody is waiting for you. That's oh, finally you showed up. Oh, thank God, we were worried. That's
I used to have thoughts like that though. I can remember
same here. I think we all have that. That's the other thing. Once you're once you get a couple of years in the industry and all that, that's we all go through different phases, and there's the imposter syndrome too. At least I speak for myself, and there's why does nobody come to my party and whatever else. It's, as artists, we're also very emotional, So it's also good to have the right perspective and see where you stand, and also. With especially artists, we have a tendency to put ourselves down and say, oh, it's because I'm not good enough and all this. So it's very important to keep a wider perspective and see that you are one of many, but that doesn't make you any less special or more special than anyone else, So just give yourself the opportunity and go for it. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, Sometimes you're out of work, use that opportunity to upskill and or follow your interest. It might lead you to a different path, and do that.
That's a very positive way of looking on that. I know there's some challenges in the industry right now with things like the writer's strike and general sort of economic situation that has people concerned. But I think there's a very positive outlook on that, and in using those times, using those opportunities to focus on what you do have control in.
Yes, you need to. Sorry, there's room service coming. I just got to tell. I'm in a hotel. Sorry.
No problem.
Sorry. Wrong room. Excuse me, it was actually a gentleman that thought my room was his room.
You could have had it. You could have had a free dinner.
No, it was actually a guy that thought my room was his room. So he looked quite surprised when I popped up. Sorry about this. No, yes, you need to, and that's the other thing with the writer's strike, and there are ups and downs, and that doesn't mean you're out forever, or and it's a way of life too. If you work as a freelancer in production, you need to adjust yourself to it also. Not only the way you approach projects and all that, also financially. Let's just say that that, like, do you need to have a bit of financial fat on you for those times? And it's a matter of planning. And I have to give credit to my wife. She's very good in rolling with the punches there, and actually she's the captain who steers the ship in the background, but we have a good understanding, and so once again, if you can put up with all that, it's a great job.
And how do you have any advice on kind of keeping the passion going through a long career with twists and turns, and how to keep that going?
Yeah, it also comes in waves, I guess. Sometimes I go like, okay, and sometimes I go like, this is awesome, and then the where the passion goes, once again, it doesn't go away forever, hopefully. Yeah, and once again, that's also where it's important that you take good care of yourself as an artist, and you know where you stand. Once again, don't be too hard on yourself. It's like, oh, my passion is gone, it's the end of the world. It's like, no, it's just right now it's gone, and do something else, or hang in there, and then it'll come again. Take good care of yourself. Are you, the job you're doing, is that okay? Or do you maybe need to change companies, or just adjust yourself for it? It's all very organic, and also with a long career, you go through different phases of your life. First you're 20, crazy, work 18 hours, go out drinking, bounce out of bed the next day. Then you're in your 30s, where hopefully learn more things and all that, and then you have children, that changes everything, and then on you go. And it's maybe as a person you stay the same, but your requirements and your outlook and all that, I think, changes, also as you get more experience. When I look back to my 20s, I go,
Me too.
Enough said about that, but that's how that goes. And so yeah, the passion, it's just, if once again, if you love it and are interested, and you always find something. I also still go back now and do pixel art. I have a little program that I can paint on, like on the Commodore 64, with all the restrictions of the hardware, not to geek out too much. And in the evenings when I'm away, I'll pixel in 160 by 200 pixels resolution, out of 16 garish colors, a pixel away, because I love it. And that also keeps me relaxed, and, touches old synaptic connections I haven't used since the 80s. And it's fun too. Just keep it interesting. That doesn't mean always you need to be on the cutting edge either. Creativity is not always bound just on technology or the latest cutting edge.
That's really interesting. Yeah, sounds like almost like a meditation of sorts that involves computer graphics. There's a sub question, I guess, here come up, is how do you know when it's the right time to walk away from a job or an opportunity?
That's an interesting question. That's yes, that I have been lucky that almost all of my jobs were, some are difficult and all that, but there are places like if you can't sleep at night because you worry about the job, for weeks on end, and you can't. I mean, that's also a matter of how involved you are. But once again, you're an artist and all that. And if it's influencing your life, if it's influencing your well-being, if it's and your inner well-being, not only work-life balance, but really where it begins to affect you, you definitely need to change. And you need to be, once again, it's about perspective. You need to be honest to yourself and try to see the bigger picture, because sometimes when you're stuck in a difficult job, you're stuck in a trench and you cannot look out, and things that are very big are actually not that big at all. And but if you're just stuck in there, and that happened to me too, when I went, oh my God, it's the end of the world. And it is not. There's a one big effects house I was at for years at just on. But I can say basically when I was at Weta, Weta is a very all-encompassing kind of company and all this, and I was always afraid to kind of step out of it, and I remember going like, oh, and especially being in New Zealand, where they're kind of like the only game, and after I left, I'm like, oh, there's a life after Weta in a way. That was just my personal experience, and not that Weta is a great place, yeah, and all that, but just that you're in one job and you don't see out of what else you could do and all this. So so this was in no way meant to. This was about my personal situation in a job, and it's really about perspective. And I went back later. I had a great time, as I said before, and it's all really, how you look at yourself and how you know yourself, and being honest to yourself where you at. That's the other thing.
Yeah, that's really good. Really good advice. Being able to get perspective, because when you're in the middle of it all, you can't see the wood for the trees. Do you have any tips on being able to get perspective whilst you're in the middle of a lot of noise?
Yeah, and I only recently found out those things too. But no, I mean, keep a balance. That sounds silly, but exercise.
Yeah, that's huge.
Just take care of yourself. Nowadays I go running. I actually ran before this, so I run 6 kilometers every morning, because it just, it gets your body started, and it's as well known, exercise makes you happy, and also if you have a sitting job, exercise is good, and just keep checks on yourself, and it's really about the perspective. Don't get stuck in anything. Or it's also sometimes hard to see that you're stuck. So that's why that getting a different perspective, meaning look at yourself in the view of another person, or don't be you for a second and step out of it and see where you're at, is very important. It sounds a bit philosophical, but that's really what prevents you from just being unwell in your job, or not realizing that it's maybe time to do something else.
Yeah, no, it's great. I mean, I think some of this stuff is some of the unspoken and really important conversations that need to be had, because sometimes people jump out of a perfectly good career just because they got to a tough time. They didn't think that it was going to end, and being able to get that perspective, being able to look after yourself is super important. It's
actually interesting because, I listen to a lot of CG podcasts and all that, but that is almost never spoken about, or not the general stream of things that I see, and I think it's almost a bit a taboo thing, because like, oh, you're not well, that means you're not doing a good job, or that because there's competition and all and all that. But we're all human beings, and in order to be creative and happy, you need to take care of all of the whole thing, and not only of having the latest version of Unreal installed and knowing all the new features. It's also cool, but you need to take care of yourself also.
Right. Yeah. If you don't do that, you got nothing, right? Yeah.
Exactly.
To complete my bingo card, I wanted to ask you about your thoughts on AI, machine learning, how that's starting to influence production and post-production.
Yeah, that's also a big question. I didn't know this was a 2-hour podcast. No, look, I think everybody has been surprised by how fast and hard it came up. Like 2-3 years ago, you had it. There was it Google's Dream? It started relatively soft and then really hit hard with Midjourney and all the other stuff. I think it's really interesting. I think people, to a part, put too much importance on it, or like it's gonna replace us. It's not really a human, It's a very clever algorithm and sophisticated piece of software. And I think the only way to tackle this is to take it as a tool. There's still, there's not going to be an icing like, don't know, or there's still somebody needs to judge the image. Even if you hammer prompts in, you can get a crappy image and you don't know it's a crappy image.
Yeah.
So you need to have an eye and you need to have an understanding. Otherwise, you cannot judge the output. Of course, you can be incredibly lucky. You get a beautiful image, but then what do you do with that? What do you take from it? How do you pass it on? How do you deploy all this? So it is here. I mean, it's being used in various art departments and for mood boards and other things. And I think, it's great. Where it's, of course, becomes contentious is, I want a concept painting like Craig Mullins, and then boom, 20 pop up and poor Craig, has his, or whoever else, but he's, it was one of the digital painting pioneers, has completely his style ripped out of him. And so that's a bit of a problem. Also, where it's hard I think in advertising, where you had illustrators doing like nice little sketches of fruit bowls or whatever, like all the little illustration things, that'll go away pretty hard. But in general, I mean, it's exciting. It's a strange new world in a way, and I'm really interested more in the weirdness of what comes out of those algorithms. If you push them and tickle them, if you can look between the gaps and see what comes out of there. So I don't want to see another big-chested anime girl, with a sword or whatever else. If you look at the stream, I mean, I'm being a bastard now, but I want to see the really where we push it to the limit and actually get visuals that somebody, a human, maybe could not contrive, and kind of lift the lid a little bit and look in there.
Right. Yeah. I mean, what you're really highlighting there is it's a tool, and the fundamentals are not going away. You still need the ultimate. We've learned tons of pieces of software in what we've done over the years, and bounce from one thing to the other. But the things that are core, the fundamentals, haven't really shifted. That's where I think photography is really strong still, and being able to understand imagery and what makes good imagery, that hasn't really changed in a very long time.
I don't think that will change because it's still made for humans, and somebody needs to judge that. And also what I wanted to say, in the end, I'm excited about the AI tools that come out. Just even, being able to enlarge an image. I did a lot of VFX concepts for Rings of Power. There was a question. I also usually do go on into post. So I leave the art department, and then I'm like the last member of the art department in a way in post. So I have a bit of institutional knowledge and can help out the visual effects supervisor like that. And also do a lot of plate concepts and things like that. And for time reasons, I could only get HD plates, and I like to paint my concepts big because some elements can be used in post, So I usually make a quite big Photoshop file and deliver that. And I just, upscale to 4K or a bit more with, I think, gigapixel. Boom. It's really for a purpose like that. It was great. It's sometimes if you look into the faces in the crowd or something, there's some weird scaling things in there. But yeah, so the tools are actually really interesting. Also, to take away the menial work that still is abundant on our side.
Yeah. I remember my first job in visual effects was match move on Harry Potter 5, and I ran away from film because I didn't like it, and then I came back into it years later. But if somebody could have taken that away from me and let me do something else, I would have been quite happy.
I did Roto too, but it teaches you something about the soft pixel space and how motion blur works and all that. So yeah.
No, it's true. Yeah, I think it's important to know about where we've come from in computer graphics and visual imagery. Well, we kind of got to the end of the hour, slightly over, in fact. But Peter, I just want to ask before we wrap: is there anything you would like to share with the audience? Anything that when places they could follow you? Anything you want to share with our community?
I'm actually fairly invisible. I've got an ArtStation account, and a lot of stuff I work on, I can't show, and when I'm busy, I don't do my own work. So you find me on ArtStation. If you just, my last name is unique, so if you punch that in, you'll find me. And other than that, I'm fairly invisible, I guess, in a way. And just, what I already wanted to say before is, take good care of yourself, and artists can only function when they're not only have the skills but also have a well-balanced inside. And keep the passion up and keep being interested.
Yeah, it's really important. I'm really glad you brought that to the conversation today, and something which I think we should talk more about. I'd love to have you back sometime, but thank you so much for being here with us today. I really appreciate it.
And thank you so much. It was a great conversation, and all the best. Have a great week, and I'd love to talk to you again sometime soon.
That would be great. Yeah, I'd love to have you back. And thanks also to our listeners. Thanks for joining us today. Thanks for asking great questions and prompting the direction of the conversation. We look forward to welcoming you back in 2 weeks. We've been CG Pro. You can follow us at becomecgpro.com or on our Facebook group and learn more about the classes and trainings that we do. But thanks for being a part of today, and we'll see you all again soon. Have a great day, everybody.